Okay.
All right. Want to welcome you guys to Inside the Hammer, episode number 4. I have the one, the only, the master, the Jedi, the Godfather. That's the word I was looking for. Mr. Greg Jacobs on the podcast. And so we're super excited. So we're actually right here in your facility. This brings back really vivid memories for me, and we'll get into that. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a 2-part episode. We're going to do the first episode we're going to do is more about your life and kind of how you got here, because every time I talk to you, I learn something new, and it's so fascinating. The second part I want to do is how you connected with us and kind of our journey together as we've grown businesses. And so anyway, welcome, Greg. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Man, walk me through some, because your life is so fascinating. Walk me through some of this.
All right. We had a big old 2-story house here in Mississippi when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And and 7 children. They all ended up in either Ole Miss or Mississippi State. All my brothers and sisters graduated from college.
Yeah. Is that where you graduated? I
was one of the youngest.
Okay.
And I was the only one home with my parents when this big old, it wasn't antebellum, but it had been built about 10 or 20 years, 15 years after the Civil War, the big old 2-story house.
Yeah.
Burned down on the morning that I was to go and take my ACT test to go to college.
Wow.
And I got my parents woke me up, and I said, "Hey, turn on the heater in the bathroom." It was old space heaters, the old matches and the old gas heaters in the wall. And I fell back asleep about 5 a.m. I fell back asleep for maybe 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and woke up and the whole room was black.
Wow.
So long story short, our house burned down. I never took an ACT test.
Wow.
But I ended up in college and ended up in California. I drove out to California. My dad had an old 3-on-the-column truck. And I said, "Daddy, if you'll just lend me the truck, they're doing free college in California if you're a resident, and you can be a resident after 1 year of working in California." So I went out to California, roofed houses for a year.
What part?
So I was just a kid out of high school. Southern California, Los Angeles area, Orange County specifically. And so roofed houses, ended up at Cal State Fullerton, went all the way through and finished, and then took off to Europe with a guitar and a banjo and a backpack and lived in Scotland for about half a year. And then ended up in Spain because I had an old college roommate that had needed a place to stay, and we had an extra room, a bunch of guys in an apartment.
Yeah.
So we became good friends. He went back to Spain, so I went down to see him, and I ended up in Spain for 20 years.
Wow.
So it was a crazy story.
That's unbelievable. I thought it was like 12 or 13. It was 20?
It was 20.
God,
it was 20.
that's amazing.
The first 6 years in radio script writing and production.
Okay.
And syndicated across
which is
Spain.
why you were so comfortable with this equipment.
I guess so.
By the way, if you're listening, I'm just going to give you a visual. So if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, we have my iPhone set up here with Filmic's new double. It's supposed to be recording both, and then we have my friend Alden's GoPro. And so anyway, if you're watching on YouTube, we're doing the best we can to bring you visuals. If you're listening, just forget everything I just said. But anyway, when we sat down, Greg was like, "Oh, I know this equipment. Like, this is all, this brings back memories." So that's really neat.
Yeah, I ended up doing master's courses several summers with the BBC at Queen's College, Cambridge. So I was in Cambridge doing radio production and script writing.
Wow.
And the script writing was my real passion. And then ended up in Spain, and I did a lot of social. And
when you say script writing, do you mean like storytelling?
Storytelling.
Okay.
Storytelling,
cool.
research.
Yeah.
And then training. I did a lot of training in radio training and so forth. So I had a studio, and I trained people in radio.
Wow.
And in radio production, and then we moved into video later. Got into a lot of other media. Built a company that was multimedia. And
so I
spent a lot of time in my latter years really just kind of being the leader of something else where I had a lot of talented people, a lot of talented staff.
Sure.
And I did a lot of social work, did a lot of work to support and help a lot of needy people. We spent, especially the latter years, we spent a lot of time working with refugees from Africa.
Wow.
And then I ended up speaking on leadership and training and management in seminars. And I traveled around Central Asia and Europe, especially the last close to 10 years, doing a lot of suitcase traveling into crazy places with airplanes.
I don't even know if I knew some of this.
You may not have.
This is crazy.
So, then my kids came back to the States to go to college, and my son ended up in Boston. My daughter ended up out in California.
Okay.
And I really felt like my time in Spain I needed to make some life decisions.
Sure.
So I came back to the States. Wasn't sure I was going to actually live in Mississippi and build a business here, but when I got here, I began to do research on coffee,
sure,
which was completely different from anything I'd ever done. So we're talking now probably over 15 years ago from right now.
Okay. So it's
fast forwarding
2005-ish?
Yeah, okay. 2005, somewhere in that period between 2000 and 2005. I landed back in the States. My parents had some physical issues. I came back here. I saw opportunity for coffee and decided that I needed to learn about coffee if I was going to do it. So I flew out to California and started a sort of a journey learning about coffee.
Let me pause you there. When you say you saw opportunity for coffee, like, what does that mean? You just came in? Was Starbucks coming in at the time, and you just said there's something to this?
I'm not sure. We probably had one Starbucks here in Jackson at that time. And a couple of independent little shops had just started pioneering coffee.
Sure.
At that time. And I was riding down a country road here in Mississippi, and I said, I don't know what to do. I don't really want to go back into media and start all over again. And my brother said, coffee, go into coffee. It's great. You need to get into coffee. That's a hot thing right now. So literally from a goofy conversation, I got interested in coffee.
Wow.
And flew out to California, and we had friends that had a hotel in the San Francisco area and invited me to stay a week and learn from their coffee shop all things coffee that I could learn. And basically they had a Starbucks in the hotel, and it was packed every day with lines out the door.
That's unbelievable.
Starting at about 6 in the morning.
Sure.
Around the corner and down the street, all the local people that lived in that area of Oakland getting their cup of joe before they took off to go to work.
That's crazy.
So I learned on an old Marzocco machine.
Yeah.
And began just getting a vision for what coffee could do. I ended up buying a car down in LA and driving all up the West Coast, just documenting coffee. So we're talking somewhere over 15 years ago, I started just looking at coffee and seeing what was going on in the United States.
That's amazing.
So I would draw and take notes and take pictures and interview coffee shop owners.
So you would show up. Hi, my name's Greg. I drove up from Orange County, and I've got a notebook I've got a camera, I've got a notebook, and I would like to ask you about your coffee business.
They loved it.
That's
Nobody
crazy.
ever asked them about their coffee.
Right?
business.
Yeah.
I made some quick friends. It was fun, actually.
That's really cool.
And I learned a lot of insight about the competitive nature of the business.
Sure.
I saw a lot of mistakes. I saw reasons why they weren't working well.
Interesting.
Started learning quickly why something was being successful.
Yeah.
Wandered around up the West Coast and all the way up to Seattle.
Wow.
Met some of the Starbucks people, took them out to lunch.
Which is coffee king.
The coffee heaven.
Yeah, that's it.
Especially at that time.
So you show up to Seattle in 2005, found some Starbucks people? Did you just go to corporate?
I met people through other people.
Okay.
Someone would say, hey, I know the guy that did all the interior decoration work.
Gotcha.
He lives down here.
Wow.
So I said, I'd love to meet him. And before it was over, I'm taking this guy out to lunch, picking his brains about interior decoration of coffee shops.
That's amazing.
So I got a chance to go through, roasting units.
Sure.
See how the process was going. Ended up in Idaho and all across the Midwest. Ended up back down to Nashville, I think it was, and then just kept right on going up the East Coast.
So you
documenting coffee.
You traveled from
the west to the east.
From coast to coast.
From coast to coast.
Every coffee roaster.
Everything I could find.
Everybody you could get access to.
Even if I was in the middle of nowhere in Montana and I'd see a little bitty tiny kiosk on some, right off the side of the interstate.
Yeah.
I'd pull in and, hey, is the owner here?
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm the owner. Hey, you got a few minutes? And I just, if it turned into 3 hours, I'd go get a hotel.
That is unbelievable.
I mean, I didn't have an agenda.
Yeah.
So
how many coffee shops do you think that use?
I have no idea. I wish I knew, and I lost most of those notes. I had drawings.
That's
I had drawings
painful.
of menu boards.
Man, that's
and
painful.
crazy notes and addresses and phone numbers. I lost so much.
Oh man,
after that whole trip.
You think 50?
But I retained a lot of what I think
Sure.
was useful. Anyway,
50 shops,
Yeah.
100 shops.
At least 50.
That's unreal.
Yeah, at least 50 shops.
Roasters, shops.
Yep,
everything.
Some roasters, and then some, mostly retail at that time.
What was something
to understand the retail side?
What was something glaring that people were doing that was obviously wrong? And then what was something glaring that people were doing that was just making them win?
I felt like customer service was probably the number one critical issue in coffee.
You've never told me this.
And I felt like it's very similar to if you go into a bar.
Yeah.
And everybody loves the bartenders.
Sure.
And the bartenders know everybody,
Yeah.
and they create community. So one of my bylines from day one has been coffee creates community.
Yeah.
You've got to create community with
Sure.
your coffee or you're not working right.
Interesting.
And the next thing that I learned also was you can't expect coffee on the West Coast to work in North Carolina just because
Why?
it worked well on the West Coast.
Why?
Because every location is different. And
Interesting.
the people are different. Your audience is different. And this goes all the way back to when I was trained in media with the BBC.
Yeah.
I had a BBC producer who said this over and over and over again. He said, if you think you're creating a script that for everybody to listen to and enjoy, you're really only creating it for yourself.
Interesting.
You've got to find out who your audience is. When I would write radio scripts in the BBC work in Cambridge, I would have to tell them who I was writing it for. This was a great practice. So I remember one of my series that I wrote for radio years ago. I wrote it for a 36-year-old single woman named Alice.
Wow.
In a small town villa in England.
So you got that detailed.
So I was writing to her.
Wow.
My script was for her specifically. And I had to delineate that to my producers.
Yeah.
I said, this is who this is for. And then we produced the whole series with sound effects and with other voices and different narrators and so forth and so on. So
that's crazy.
It really grilled into me back then that everything we do that makes us successful, and coffee specifically, you need to know who you're giving this to.
Yeah.
You need to know who your audience is.
Wow.
And you can't come in and think you're going to do something great just because you brought it in from Idaho.
Wow.
And it's going to work in Mobile.
Interesting.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Is that your audience? So everybody tries to find coffee and set standards in coffee and then try to educate people. This is great coffee. You need to be educated. Then I'm going to show you how great my coffee is. No.
Wow.
The very best we can do with people is give them coffee that they already think this is good.
Wow.
And push their envelope just a little bit to make it even better.
Sure. Yeah.
That's where you want to take your customer. You can't take them farther than they can go.
That's so interesting. We call that, the term I have for that, and it might be a wrong term, I call it being romantic. Like when you're trying to educate so much your customer past their level of, I guess, comfort, or it's something that you personally just love and you want to kind of push it on people. I call it being romantic.
That's a good one.
And it's not just in coffee. I've seen it in beer. I've seen it in breweries. I've seen it in other places too. People try to be romantic about it.
Exactly.
And it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Okay, so fast forward. So you do this massive trip from coast to coast, which is just blows me away. And this is why you're the reason that we've been even as successful as we've been. You're the reason we're still in business. And we're going to get to that.
That's huge.
We're going to get to that in part 2. There's a deep dive there we're going to do. So you go coast to coast and you say, I want to do this. I want to start roasting. Mm-hmm. So then what do? You move back to Mississippi?
I did. I came back and family reasons really brought us back to settle. Yeah. And it was more caretaking. My wife's parents lived about 35 miles from right here as we speak. Okay. And then my parents were here and we'd all grown up together. So all of these people now are aging, her parents and mine, and are at a position. So it guided me a good bit. Yeah. And I did see opportunity here, and I began to just build on that opportunity.
Sure.
And it started very simple, and it's continued to grow. And now we cover, some states, and our reach has grown, especially in the home market where we ship to homes across the United States with our coffees and so forth.
Yep. I want to drill down a little bit because from what I understand, you have 3 businesses.
Correct.
You have a distributor business, which is like you distribute syrups and sauces.
Right.
You have a roasting business.
Yes.
You're genius because then you have a repair business. Correct. So a lot of your guys are in Starbucks every single day. They're in local coffee shops, fixing things, repairing things. The genius part about that, and again, we're going to get into that in the second part of this, is I call you and say, Greg, what machine do I want? And you're like, oh, we know these inside and out. You want this one because we have the little, anyway, it's genius. We'll get there. I want to drill down and focus really on your roasting, like, because roasting is a very complex animal, and it's a very how did you get there? And I want you to talk us through your team and your process. And
I'd say, I started first with the wholesale distribution because I saw the need in coffee shops all across the South for having to bring their products in from way far away. Sure. And that was just an easy decision to make. But the enticement of getting into roasting coffee, what I did was, again, sort of what I'd already done. I took a trip, and I went out to Sandpoint, Idaho, and studied for a week in a roasting factory to learn the roasting business from that angle. And got a chance to really interact with a company called Diedrich, one of the roasters that's pretty common today. So
this rings a bell now.
I bought my first Diedrich, and I roasted, and it did well. I gained some real good feedback from it, and I sold that business. I sold in the roaster. I actually trained the people that took it over, and they took it off, and it was gone. Wow. And it was very hands-on, very labor-intensive. Roasting is not as easy as just turning beans brown. Sure. It's anybody can do that in a barbecue pit out back. Sure. Yeah. But to make roasting work well, there are over 130 chemical components in a coffee bean, and people are often seduced into the idea of roasting because it looks like it's going to be really fresh for their customer. Right. But actually, the whole roasting industry is very complicated, and all coffee comes from around the equator. So you just take the center of the world, the globe, and the equator that runs all the way around basically is where coffee is grown. And so you can travel that across Latin America and over to East Africa, and then all the way around to the Indonesian countries, India, and that's where you're going to find your coffees. Interesting. And so you've got to bring coffee in. So let's turn this around for a moment. You've got to bring in cabbage. Let's just say you're in the cabbage business. All right, so now I've got to bring cabbages from overseas. I've got to cook these cabbages and sell them. And I'm hoping that when they get here in a sack, they're going to be as good as what I'd hoped. So there's an awful lot of science in getting the best beans, getting beans that really taste, because the flavors and the wonder of coffee, not only is it the art of roasting, but the quality that's in the bean itself. Yep. So,
and Greg, you've told me before on the phone, you've just said, Jeff, we source the top 1% of beans in the entire world.
Yes, it would probably fall about that.
What do you mean by that? And how do you do that? And why doesn't everybody do that?
People don't realize how big coffee is. I mean, there are millions of farmers, literally millions of farmers farming coffee all around the world. It is the second largest commodity sold in the world after petroleum. Wow. Coffee is the number 2 commodity. And so it's a monstrous business. So when you've got, huge amounts of coffee coming out of Brazil, most of it is mediocre. But then there's some great Brazil coffee. Interesting. Coffee tends to do better as it's higher on elevation. Yeah. So up in the mountains, the reason why is because it's cooler and it grows slower. Interesting. And the slower it grows, the better it comes out with its sweetness and its fruitiness and all the good developments. Sure. If you grow coffee down on lower elevations, the heat of the day, the way even the terrain in a lower elevation,
like the soil
quality, and everything else can change it. And then you get coffee that tastes really bad, and you go, why does this coffee taste so bad, and why does this one taste so good? Wow. So coffee does make a big difference. And you can even have from one little plantation to a plantation just down the road. Literally get on your motorcycle and drive 5 minutes to the next plantation, and it's monstrously better.
That's crazy.
And so, and it may have to do that the shade of the mountain itself falls first on one side of the mountain before it reaches the other side, and it was the game changer on that whole coffee.
Wow.
So there's so many little factors.
That's unreal.
And everybody's elbowing each other in the coffee business to get the best ones first.
So how do you get it? What's your secret?
Well, there's several ways. One, you're looking for volume. The more we roast coffee as a coffee business, and we've got a team of people, and we do this every day now with several roasters going all day long.
Yeah, so, we were just cupping with you guys a minute ago. Y'all were testing, I think, a Papua New Guinea.
Exactly. So, and we're testing coffees, and we're rejecting probably 95% of what we taste. Because we've got to select from those and find the right ones for us.
What would you say most roasters take? Do they just take 100%, whatever shipped to them, they just roast it and sell it? Or do they have a similar process to you?
They would have to have some of this process, because what you get is you've got intermediate buyers here in the United States that go and they cup on plantations around the world. Some of them even have permanent residents living in those countries all the year round.
Wow.
So that
testing and cupping
and working and actually contributing to the agronomy.
Wow.
There's great contributions going on by the coffee business has gone up so much in the past 25 years.
Sure.
Where a great plantation with good potential coffee was doing a lot of bad practice.
Wow.
And the products coming out very poorly.
Yep.
You get a good agricultural engineer, somebody that's from the University of California, somebody from from a good reputable background in agronomy.
Yeah.
Send them down there and let them work for a year or two.
Wow.
With say a co-op or a valley or a mountain area, and let them work with those farmers.
Yeah.
And they all of a sudden the production is higher, the quality is better.
Wow.
Everything coming out, and now they can get more money for their coffee because it's a better quality coffee.
Wow.
This is happening all over the world right now. It's really neat.
You told me one time that farmers even have access, like in Guatemala, these farmers have access to iPads.
Oh yeah.
And they can roast it to the profile that they think is the best output, I guess, of that coffee bean, right? But then they can ship it to you, and you said they can send you their settings, right? They can send you, and you can roast it exactly how they roasted it in Guatemala, and you either decide, yes, I agree, or no, I don't agree. I think I can get a better flavor profile out of this. Yeah,
we've got certain machines here. They're very expensive. Some of the British technology that's really hit the ground running in the last few years.
Yeah,
where these small machines are buyable by, say, a group of farmers. Maybe this farmer can't afford it, but if there's 25 farmers across an area, they'll form a co-op, which is really just them being able to come together to have the potential to do something bigger.
Sure, yeah.
And they'll create their own little lab, which may be as simple as one room with some tables and some weight scales and some maybe different testing devices.
Wow.
And then a tiny roaster.
That's
so they'll put it in the roaster and roast it, and they'll do it all via Bluetooth with an iPad.
Yeah.
And they'll be able to memorize in the iPad that setting. Mail us a tiny envelope of those hard beans. They don't look at all like what you find in the grocery store.
Sure.
They're pale and hard.
Yeah.
And instead of being dark brown and larger, they kind of get bigger as they roast.
Sure.
So they'll send us an envelope of them, and then we'll find the profile for it and be able to replicate it identically in the same type of machine.
That's unbelievable.
Get the same results, and then cup that and taste it and see what the farmer's tasting.
Yeah.
So that's a game changer.
That is unreal.
Yeah, it's really, all these little helps are helping us.
So you feel like I feel like what I'm hearing is part of the quality of what you roast is because you're so particular, or you're so aggressive on sending beans back and just saying no, like we don't want this, right?
Oh, I've even had them video us while we take a whole sack of beans, 150 pounds. That's a $500 investment.
Yeah.
Just take the sack and literally push it over into a dumpster.
That's unbelievable.
And send them back the video and say, we threw this away. Yeah. We just want you to see we did not even use it. It was unusable.
That's unbelievable.
So there are so many different types of ways that coffee can get bad just getting to you from harvest.
Sure.
With mildew and rot and funguses, a zillion types. So I've even been in courses, like in Roasters Guild retreats, where you're just tasting all of the bad in coffee.
Interesting.
And trying to identify it. I was in one retreat where they even flew in a fungus from Brazil for us to taste in that conference.
Really?
So that we could taste that and understand it and be able to identify these different defects that you might miss if you weren't really aware of them.
Sure. And I'm sure people...
It's a learned practice to acclimate your palate to tasting the differences in coffee.
Yeah, for sure. Talk to me, speaking of acclimating your palate and learning that process. You've mentioned to me before, is it a Q taster?
Yeah, it's the Q grade.
The
test.
Q grade. Will you talk to me about that process?
Right.
And you have someone certified?
Not yet.
But
Not
you're
yet.
in the
We're working on
process.
it. Yes,
you're working
we are.
towards that.
Yeah, we've got several people here that our goal is to see them eventually be able to graduate to a Q grade license.
Tell our listeners what that is, what that means,
okay,
what that looks like.
Right, Q grading is an international. It's like being a vintner in the wine business, where you only a certain type of people ever make it to a certain level. Wow. in being able to identify things in wine and be able to grade wines accurately in, day out. And it is a trained process. We use a lot of smells to train. We have very expensive lab stuff here where they smell throughout. They'll do classes and sessions of smelling different smells to identify certain smells, because if you smell something enough, you can taste it.
And wine's like that too.
Because olfactory, your senses through your smells are all tied with your tongue and all of your gustatory system. So you can what you're smelling. If you can learn how to identify smells, like if you smell cinnamon, and you go, "Oh, I smell cinnamon somewhere," then when you taste it, you go, "Oh, I'm tasting cinnamon in this." Wow. And you can do the same thing with about 1,000 different types of smells that we're not really used to identifying.
What were we smelling?
We don't even know, but we're smelling something we don't know what we're smelling sometimes.
What were we smelling back there with the Papua New Guinea? Was that like apple?
Yeah, what they were identifying in the coffee while they were we were in that, just stepped into their cupping session, where several of them were sampling different Papua New Guinea coffees from the islands out in Indonesia. Yeah. And so some of the identifiers that they had today, I heard one say turmeric, another one said pepper, another one said spicy, which probably was the pepper the other one was tasting.
But the room
everyone there was tasting different nuances and smells.
The room smelled sweet though. Like it had a sweet smell to it.
I'm not sure.
I just didn't know if that was
It was probably all had to do with the actual what you were smelling with the fragrances in that coffee.
Interesting.
They had them steeping there. A lot of coffee. Same coffee.
It smelled amazing. I mean, it was almost like a candle. Like I know it's crazy, but
it can be very candled.
Yeah, it had that. It had that effect. You know. Sorry, I didn't mean to interject, but keep going. So the Q grader, it's you guys are.
It's a very prestigious license, and not that many people have it. So, and once you've reached Q grade, it really does. You've gotten an affirmation that your taste buds and your smells
are dialed in.
Are really dialed in. They're really there.
Interesting.
And you can lose them. That's why you have to do it all the time. So, let's say I don't taste and test coffees for 2 months. I'm rusty.
Wow.
And I can miss a lot of things, and I can be really out with the team because they're all in their cupping every day together.
Wow. Sure.
They're all speaking the same language.
Yeah.
So, like we had a farmer and her son come up from Guatemala once, and we're in this very room where we're speaking, and they came in to visit us and to present us some of their Guatemalan coffees for the following year to see if we'd be interested. And so I walked in, got in late, and so they prepared me some coffee. They'd already been preparing it for some of the others here, and I took a sip, and I said, I'm getting some dark cherry and some chocolate, caramel, and I don't know what else I said, but I gave them some descriptions. And then Ahmed, who's one of our team members, came in after I'd completely finished and was sitting down chatting with him, and they prepared his coffee, and he tasted it, and they said, "How is it?" He said, "Yeah, I'm getting some dark cherry and some chocolate, and some caramel," and he was identifying it exactly the way I had just done.
That's unbelievable.
And they were floored.
Wow.
Because we were speaking the same language that day on that coffee.
You guys are just that in tune. because you do it so much.
Especially the team now.
Yeah.
I'm less so right now because of administration.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
running the
You got a
business.
lot going on.
I'm a little step back from it. I miss it.
Yeah,
I miss
no.
that intensity because it really is gratifying.
They were in tune in the room. I mean, we were in there, all three of them.
They're
were
very comfortable with each other.
Yeah, they were synced together.
Yeah,
they knew what they were
speaking their
talking.
language.
Yep. That was it.
Yeah.
So what is how much does Ahmed lack on?
Probably not much.
So he's almost there.
I think so. And Paul too.
In a big, Paul's almost there too?
Oh, yeah.
That's cool. So,
both of those guys.
So a big bragging point, I guess, for us and for you being the roaster of Yellowhammer is, hey, we have Q graders. Or like, what's the label? Like Q grade, is that what you call it? Like
Q grade license.
A Q grade license.
Q graders. Yeah,
so our roaster
that.
is a Q grade license, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's cool. And that's a big.
He's a licensed Q grade cup tester.
How many people do you think have that in the world?
Oh, it wouldn't be but a few hundred around the world.
So
You're
it's
talking millions of people working in coffee every day.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And that few of Q graders.
And even just as short time ago as 10 years, there probably were only a dozen people in the United States at that time.
Wow.
It's
That's
really,
unreal.
it's grown.
Yeah, sure.
And it's more reachable too.
Yeah.
There's a lot more tools and ways to facilitate helping people get there.
That's unbelievable.
So if they'll take the time and put in, the problem with a lot of roasting companies, small to medium, is they don't take the time to really, really, really obsess over it that way. If they can find a modicum of success in selling coffee, they just repeat that every day. And they hope and they believe and they count on what somebody else tells them about coffee. This is a great coffee. You're going to like this, and they sell it to them.
Yeah, you've told me.
They're not really testing the coffees they should be.
Here's one thing I learned from you. You said people call you all the time and say, hey, I have a great Colombian. And most people you said will say, great, ship it to me. We'll love it. And you say, great, ship me a sample.
We don't buy anything without testing it first.
And that's the difference.
Everything has
right?
all the little samples. We have tiny roaster in here it's a little micro roaster.
Yeah.
That replicates the bigger roasters.
Yeah.
And so we roast all these little tiny samples.
Sure. And cup them.
Up.
Yeah.
And we make those decisions based on it. We disappoint a lot of guys that try to sell it because we're just not going to buy it.
You said, you had like 10 of them come in the other day that you guys sampled.
Yes.
You sent back 9 and kept one.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Happens all the time.
The one thing I've learned from you, or actually I've learned a lot from you, one of the main things is I love how you blind taste test everything. And it's not just your coffee. You use the same methodology, and I want to get in that in part 2. The same methodology you use with your coffee cupping is almost what you do with the products that you sell in your separate business, in your separate line, kind of your distribution business.
I am never satisfied with what we're doing.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I'm always figuring there's going to be some other revelation I'm going to get.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's going to excite me.
Yeah.
It's going to be Christmas all over again.
Literally, I mean, right before we turned the cameras on and started the podcast, you handed me something from Dr. Smoothie. It's a brand new product.
About it.
Tell them, what is it? Because we might bring it down.
Yeah, it's a matcha mint chip.
It was actually
frappe.
I hate matcha.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of matcha. It tastes like chlorophyll.
I didn't tell you that when you handed it to me.
I'm actually adverse to it.
Yeah,
and I like this.
I'm telling you, it was a good product. Like we may ship it down to Mobile and just start testing it.
So we're not brand loyal here.
Yeah, no, that's what I love.
We really base, and I've had a lot of people beg me to take their products.
Sure. You've pissed a lot of people off.
Yeah, well, actually, we have probably disappointed a few.
Oh, sure. You've pissed off tons of people.
But we get a chance with that to just keep gleaning and finding interesting products for the customers. Mm-hmm. And that really that's my joy. That's what amazing. I love doing. So that's
unbelievable. What is just as we're wrapping up part 1, what's the future of your business? What is the future of roasting? Like, what is the future of coffee? Like, where do you see this thing going in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
I think it's balancing some. We went through a phase, the 15 plus years ago that I was traveling around the United States. We were in an obsession, a Starbucks obsession, because you got to realize we came out of World War II with Folgers and Sanka and all kinds of other lousy coffees.
And we call that kind of first wave coffee.
That's right.
First wave was kind of Folgers.
Americans really got into drinking coffee big time.
Yeah.
And it was a very medium to low grade coffee quality because what they wanted was something that they could roast in a way and put it in a can, vacuum seal it, and it would last for a long, long time.
Sure. Yeah.
And so then you've got the whole second wave, which was dark roasted, started with Alfred Peet, that founded Peet's Coffee.
Yeah, Peet's.
The West Coast.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so Pete was this Dutch guy that showed up in L.A. and started our little roaster, and he would sell the coffee for $0.05 a cup.
Wow.
But basically, he wanted you to taste the coffee, so you'd buy the coffee and take it home.
Oh,
and so
that
Pete
was his
had
model.
many disciples.
Interesting.
He never married. He finally retired up in a retirement home up in Oregon, but his place was in Oakland, California. And he really founded what became the Starbucks coffee.
Wow.
Or what we now call the West Coast coffee.
Interesting.
Very, very dark roasted, very glossy. All the oils have been pulled out of the coffee bean.
Yeah,
because
Starbucks
outside,
is really oily.
Really oily.
Yep.
And that's just a stressed coffee.
So you think Starbucks got that from Pete? Because I feel like
directly.
Didn't Howard Schultz do this whole to Europe?
No.
None of this.
It all came directly from Pete.
So they looked at Pete and said, Pete
was a father.
We can sell this. We can roast like he does.
Yeah, actually, Starbucks had already started when Schultz took it.
Right, yeah, because they had that one shop. And
it already had the Pete imprint on it.
And so, okay, interesting.
So a lot of the coffee out there went very dark and very kind of smoky type of Indonesian kind of tasting coffee.
Makes sense.
And so,
but the pendulum has swung drastically, right?
Yes.
So
now
we were dark coffees.
We're back towards center where we went almost to the other extreme.
Talk about
Yeah, you hardly roast it in third wave coffee. You roast it to the lightest you can do it without it tasting green.
Sure.
And it has the maximum number of fruits and flavors.
Sure.
It's much more flavorful. See, the longer you keep a coffee bean in a roaster, the more it caramelizes, and they all begin to taste the same.
Interesting.
They all taste a little over roasted.
So you would under roast it to get that kind of that light fruity.
That's right.
That's why it's so bright.
Yeah,
it's
so
very
you get
bright.
A lot of
it's very light.
Bright, light tasting. Sometimes almost sharp tasting.
Sure. Yeah. But that was a fad, and then single origin.
And
you really wanted it.
It's still very popular in certain locations in the United States. Yeah. But again, I think we're balancing back toward a nice medium roast. It's not overly dark. It's not overly light.
And I feel like that's where
in the middle.
So first wave was Folger, second wave was Pete / Starbucks. Third wave was really kind of this bright single origin,
very light roasted.
Very light.
Now we're kind of in the fourth wave.
Yeah, fourth wave. I feel like I almost tell people. I tell people that we're a high functioning third wave shop, which probably isn't accurate. We're probably like 2.5, right? But we may be fourth. You know what I mean?
You're probably closer to fourth.
Because we're using your coffee, but we're pushing very high volume.
Yes.
But we're still very in tune with what that shot needs to look like. You know, the timing of it, the pressure of it, the quality of it, what's been roasted.
Every bit of that detail makes the great taste that you get.
We're obsessive about it. I mean, you just switched this from steel burrs to titanium burrs because it's going to be a little bit more finer. It's going to be a little bit more.
You're going to cut the bean.
Yep.
When you grind it, you're slicing the bean up just a little bit finer, a little bit smoother and more consistent.
Yeah, it's those micro adjustments we make all the time. You and I talk all the time with new equipment.
If you took a microscope and you looked at ground beans, in a mediocre grinding situation, you're going to have large particles and small.
Sure.
And the small are probably going to get, when they get into water and you pull the goodies out of that coffee in hot water, the smallest particles are going to get over extracted.
Yeah.
In other words, you're going to pull the bitters out of that.
Interesting.
And the bigger pieces aren't going to get a good extraction.
Sure.
Because they were too large.
Yeah.
So unevenness is huge. And
interesting.
It actually has more of an effect on coffee than people ever know.
Which is why you had to switch burrs.
Which is why it's important to keep everything really running well.
Sure, yeah. We're freaks on
quality.
We're freaks on maintenance.
I know you are.
Water quality that goes in.
Water quality.
Timing of the shot, how you're grinding it. You know.
Yep.
Even we're obsessive on. We use the 8-second rule on our shots. Even when a shot pulls, we want it in something within 8 seconds or less.
Love it.
You know, because you drink a fresh shot, tastes amazing. Let it sit there for a minute and then drink it, and you're like, oh wow,
it's got a lot of changes.
Yeah, it really has a lot. You know.
And it's because you're pulling the goodies out of coffee in such a fine powder.
Sure. Yeah.
Espresso is makeup powder.
Yeah.
You're grinding it all the way down to this powdery form.
Sure.
And when you pull that out of there, it's delicate, fragile.
Yeah.
And people understand it when you use it, an analogy like a piece of bread.
Sure.
You take a piece of wheat bread that's been processed. It's processed wheat. They created a loaf of bread out of the grocery store, and you take a slice of bread and throw it on the counter. And you come back in 10, 15 minutes, and it's all hard and crusty on the outside.
Yeah, sure.
It's oxidizing.
Right.
The air the air itself is breaking that down that quick.
Yep.
It's as bad or worse with coffee.
Wow.
Coffee is very fragile and much more. That's why there's a difference sometimes that when people open a bag of coffee from the grocery store and they go, wow, that smells good.
Yeah.
And then they seal it back up really quickly, and then they reopen it the next morning, and it doesn't have half the wow effect.
Interesting.
It's that fragile.
Wow.
Yeah.
That and because they put it in the freezer. I'm just kidding.
Oh, yeah. You don't want to do that one either. Whoever's listening to this, do not put it in your freezer.
So you think we're onto something. You think the future of coffee, we're kind of balancing it out a little bit, getting a little bit of volume. We're using better equipment, better machines. I know you're obsessive about even what the machines that you sell, and we're going to get into that in the second part.
Yeah.
All of that stuff. So it's encouraging to know that it just feels like it's, and you're growing. I mean, you've grown as fast as we've grown since I've known you.
It's, anyone can go in and go, boy, that was a good steak.
Yeah.
And then they go over to another place and they go, now that's probably the best steak I've ever had.
Wow.
What happened? It was probably the quality, the care, the obsession, the aging process. It could be a lot of reasons. They might be 14 little reasons added together.
Sure. Yeah.
That made one place taste better
Yeah.
than another. So the obsession in that regard really sometimes can make a huge difference.
Wow. That's amazing.
So, yeah.
Anything else for this podcast? Just kind of your life, your process, how you've built this company, I think the only thing I would add is that whoever's listening and you're interested in getting into this type of business, it's always great to start by thinking about people and that you're doing it for people. You're not doing this so that you've got a great IRA, a great retirement benefit, a great, a mansion. You're doing it because it feels good to do. Yeah.
And you're proud of what you do. And if I wasn't proud of what I was doing, and if I wasn't feeling like I was doing it for everyone's betterment, that I'm actually adding value to people who work with me and for me, and adding value to the quality of what I'm giving out, then I'm feeling like I'm not doing something right. Even if the bank account looks great, I'll feel very dissatisfied.
Wow.
So it's so important to have that passion that goes beyond just being what we call monetarily successful.
Sure. Wow.
Yeah.
That's good, man.
Passion.
Nobody lives this better than you. I can attest to that. Man, this has been such a great, thank you so much for just kind of our first part. So anyway, this is Inside the Hammer, edition number 4, episode number 4. That's what I was looking for. We've had Greg Jacobs on. So this is going to end this first segment here. So now we're going to go into a second segment that we're going to talk about how your company and Yellowhammer has come together and how you have single-handedly kept us in business for all this time. So join us.
I'll have to let him do a lot of that talking.
join us for that podcast if you enjoyed this one. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you right here in the next one when we talk about how our companies work together. Thank you, guys.